They obey the rules of the road and wear a helmet built for higher speeds. Wolfson Children's Hospital, always here. The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler. On today's First Coast Connect, unsafe behind bars. We talked to a former warden and state prison investigator about the safety concerns behind a staggering budget request. Then, synergy in Black history. We talked to the woman behind a planned Black History Museum and the launch of a new Black art and culture magazine. And the historic Aeolian of Oakwood Choir brings spirituals, gospel, and jazz to the First Coast. Plus, a chance to get your hands dirty at a pair of local farm tours. Join the conversation. Give us a call at 904-549-2937 or email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. It's all ahead this hour after the day's news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. Vice President Vance has arrived in Israel, part of an effort by the Trump administration to bolster the shaky ceasefire between Hamas and Israel. NPR's Greg Myrie reports 2 other U.S. envoys are already there.
Vice President Vance is hoping to keep the truce on track and nudge Israel and Hamas to move toward the more challenging part of the deal, known as Phase 2. Vance arrived a day after Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff and President Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, landed here as part of the same mission. They've already held talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Israel and Hamas traded extensive fire on Sunday, but Gaza has been mostly calm since then. The ceasefire now calls for a new government in Gaza, an Israeli troop pullback, and for Hamas to give up its weapons. At the moment, there's no clear plan for any of these steps. Greg Myrie, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
The federal government shutdown is now 21 days old. The Senate has again failed to pass a spending bill that could bring it to an end. President Trump is expected to host Republican senators today at the White House. Senate Majority Leader John Thune could take up a bill this week that would pay some federal workers. Former FBI Director James Comey is asking a federal judge to throw out the Justice Department's charges that he allegedly made false statements to Congress. NPR's Kerry Johnson reports Comey says he's only being prosecuted because President Trump demanded it.
President Trump fired Comey as the FBI director in 2017, and Comey went on to become a fierce critic. The Justice Department won an indictment against Comey for allegedly misleading and obstructing Congress under pressure from Trump, who's called him a dirty cop and a slime ball. Now Comey's moving to dismiss the case because he says it's a vindictive or selective prosecution. He says at least 4 top officials during President Trump's first term allegedly lied to Congress, and none of them was charged with any crimes. The president's animus against Comey's so intense that the Justice Department recently fired Comey's daughter without any clear reason. Kerry Johnson, NPR News, Washington.
The U.S. Census Bureau says that last year, female workers earned about 81 cents for every dollar earned by a male worker. Child care costs are extremely expensive. Some women may be opting to limit costs by staying home. Taylor Tedford reports on corporate culture for the Washington Post. She says the trend may be gaining steam after major companies required workers to return to the office after the pandemic.
What's kind of unique recently and contributing in all likelihood to the wage gap is that it looks like women are about 3 times as likely as men to leave after RTO mandates are put in place. That's return to office.
She spoke to NPR's All Things Considered. You're listening to NPR News from Washington.
Good morning. You're listening to WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. I'm Stephen Ponson. It's now 9:04. The St. Johns County Commission meets this hour, and on the agenda is a new state law that's supposed to make hurricane recovery smoother. But critics say SB 180 undermines local government's ability to plan for the future. St. John's is one of a number of counties state regulators say violated the new law during its long-term planning process. The last time the commission met, 2 of the 5 elected commissioners said they were in favor of joining other Florida cities and counties in suing the state. The other 3, however, were less keen on the idea. The meeting takes place in the county auditorium on San Sebastian View in St. Augustine. State leaders hope to land the next generation of air transport companies at a testing facility in Central Florida. Gina Jordan has more.
Florida Transportation Secretary Jared Perdue envisions vertiports to serve as hubs for short commutes by battery-powered aircraft, similar to airplanes and helicopters. Vertiports are primarily for electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. These vehicles would provide short air transport, like an Uber. Governor Ron DeSantis recently said he was mildly excited about the effort to reduce congestion along the I-4 corridor as the state tries to attract this growing technology to Polk County. Plans have been announced for aerial testing at a facility there. I'm Gina Jordan.
We're going to be warm and dry today here in Northeast Florida. We'll have mostly sunny skies this afternoon with highs reaching the mid-80s inland, lower 80s along the coast.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Capital One, offering their premium travel card, Venture X. What's in your wallet? Terms apply. Details at CapitalOne.com. And listeners like you who donate to this NPR station.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, the safety of inmates and guards is on the line daily in the state's outdated and understaffed prisons. We talked to a former warden about how the underfunded system breeds violence and burnout. Later in the program, a historic choir performs, a brand new magazine launches, and an agro-tourism adventure opens up local farms. But first, Florida Department of Corrections Secretary Ricky Dixon told state lawmakers last week he was coming to them with a, quote, staggering budget request. Here to help us understand why is retired warden and former retired senior investigator with the Florida Department of Corrections, Aubrey Land. Aubrey, thank you so much for being here.
Yes, ma'am. And I was not a former warden, only a senior law enforcement inspector. That was the rank that I retired at.
Gotcha. Okay. So you retired in 2016. You had about 30 plus years in law enforcement. And you worked at a number of facilities.
Throughout the state, I was in and out of most every facility in the state.
I think you ran me through Mayo, Columbia, Hamilton, Cross City, Jefferson, Taylor, Wakulla. So a bunch.
A lot.
Yeah. And you're still active. You testify sometimes as an expert in civil cases. So you are still kind of connected to the system. As I mentioned, Ricky Dixon told the meeting last week of the Senate Appropriations Committee on Criminal and Civil Justice that this funding request, staggering is what he called it, but he said this is not a want or a need like some other requests. This is a must to keep the prison system operating safely.
It is staggering. I can understand the need for it. We have multiple facilities throughout the state of Florida that has been damaged in recent storms. Mayo Correctional Institution, Taylor Correctional, and many others along the Gulf Coast have fallen into disrepair. There's significant damage. Those were great investments that we made in our system. We have had a reduction of inmates in the last 10, 15 years. We went from a high of about 101,000 down to 83,000, and now that's climbing back up. Some of the projections are that there'll be 10,000 additional in the next 12 to 18 months. With that said, we have to make the repairs on the facilities that are damaged. I would have to to believe that's a very accurate amount, somewhere in the $500 million range.
This is a issue of facilities, and in part repairs, but it is very much an issue of safety. One of the things that Ricky Dixon told lawmakers was that assaults on staff in the last few years are up 49%, and that assaults on inmates on inmates, is up 50%. Just a really alarming increase. Um, he said that the agency is managing about 100,000 more inmates than it did a decade ago with the same staff, and that leading to just an insufficient patrol on duty when people are overseeing inmates.
Well, the number of correctional staff in our prisons have dropped drastically. Um, Retention of staff is probably one of the biggest problems facing the department today. There's many factors that goes into that. A lot of it is the criminal element that you talked about a moment ago. Not only the assault on staff and the inmate on inmate violence, but we also have criminal gangs who operate within every facility across the state. The introductions of contraband is staggering. It is a multi-million-dollar industry. Unfortunately, many of our young staff members who have been hired recently get involved in relationships with inmates. A pack of cigarettes selling anywhere from $200 to $300 a pack inside of a facility entices correctional staff to bring the cigarettes in, sell them to the inmates. Once that happens, then they have to continue that enterprise with the inmate, fearing that they're going to get caught, and eventually they will. That is part of our turnover, and that is a lot of the reason that we're seeing the amount of violence inside of our prisons, whether it's against inmate on inmate staff or whether it's
Because people who are working there are compromised by these gangs.
absolutely.
Yeah. And that is an unbelievable amount of money. I mean, one of the things to think about there, and I'm sure is part of the equation, is when someone is being offered $300 to bring in a pack of cigarettes, that's a day's wages for these fellows. That's not, and women. I mean, it's not a little bit of money, and they are not paid an enormous salary. It has not been necessarily a wage that's kept up with adjacent states like Alabama.
No, we had a lot of problems with administrations leading up to this point. Under Charlie Crist, he basically gutted the department. He was not giving any type of raises. Rick Scott follows, and he wanted to privatize the entire Department of Corrections, and he gutted us further. Recently, Governor DeSantis has invested a lot of money back into the Department of Corrections. His first secretary was Mr. Inch, and Mr. Inch left because he couldn't get the funding to run the facilities that he needed to run them satisfactory. Mr. Dixon has come along and has done a great job. Some of the things that I'm really impressed with the last two secretaries about is investing in preparing inmates for release. We have some really good programs that are taking place there, and I believe that will be a cost savings for the state in the coming years.
One of the things that Ricky Dixon told lawmakers was, we have a staffing problem because we have a staffing problem. And it was sort of this idea that, when people are working in a place where they're being forced to work in unsafe environment, they're being forced to work mandatory overtime in a lot of situations, that they're getting burned out. But he also talked about just the, staff to inmate ratio, particularly having very young people. He was describing teenagers supervising as many as 150 inmates by themselves. Let's just watch and listen to a little of what he had to say.
No one, regardless of the experience, should be by themselves with 150 inmates. We've normalized this as if it's just okay. In other states, you may see 1 to 35, 1 to 40, and that's not good. But 1 to 150, and then to compound that by knowing that some of these individuals have less than a month, just a few weeks with us.
So, the security of inmates is something that doesn't necessarily get people as riled up as the security of people who are overseeing them and guards. That is something that people do care about. But there was other ways that Ricky Dixon laid out how this is impacting even the general public. He described the vehicles that the Department of Corrections is driving inmates from facility to facility with. He said 65% of their vehicles are below the Department of Management Services standards in terms of mileage and age. And he said, quote, "We have dangerous individuals running up and down the interstate every day, breaking down on the side of the road and having to be offloaded." So he was describing something that was news to me, that's something happening with that frequency where inmates are being transported and the buses or the vehicles that they're on are breaking down.
That happens every day throughout the state of Florida. As a senior law enforcement inspector, I would be traveling around the state, and I cannot tell you the number of times that I would come up on a DOC vehicle that was broke down on the side of the road. You may have lifers inside that vehicle, maximum custody inmates, have 2 corrections officers in that van, and they're on the side of the road broke down with 12 inmates inside of it. And I have stopped many, many times and waited till we could get another bus there. The vehicle fleet that we have in the Florida Department of Corrections, I would venture to say if OSHA come in and checked them, they'd shut half of them down. They're horrible. And Mr. Dixon is absolutely correct. We need to upgrade our fleet. We need to upgrade our staffing levels.
If you're just joining us, we are talking to former prison inspector Aubrey Land about the prison safety situation and a recent staggering funding request by the FDC secretary. You can join our conversation by giving us a call at 904-549-2937 or by emailing firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. We have a call from Mark on the South Side. Good morning, Mark. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning. Mr. Lamb was talking about this just a moment ago about retention of correctional officers, the low pay, and how they may get somewhat enticed by bringing in contraband for the prisoners. But my question is, does coercion ever come into play where gangs may threaten a correctional officer's, family, friends, that kind of a thing, and basically coerce them into those bad actions?
Thanks, Mark.
Well, to answer Mark's question, I have never seen that. Now, I'm not saying that once a corrections officer has put themselves in that position, if they attempt to renege on the agreements or stop bringing in drugs, then yes, there is a lot of intimidation. You have outside gang members who can go anywhere and do most anything. So there is one case in the state. I'm not allowed to talk about it because there's still litigation related to it. But we know that resulted in death. So
the death of a corrections officer?
Yes.
As like a retaliatory measure?
I can't go into it very much. But the officer was involved in criminal gang activity, bringing in contraband and other things of that nature, and then tried to stop and ended up dead.
We've got a call from Stephen at the Beaches. Good morning, Stephen. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning. I was wondering, are there any advocacy groups that you guys know of that are trying to help the prisons and change these conditions that I could perhaps get involved with?
Stephen, thanks. Aubrey, I mean, I know Florida Cares is one big kind of prisoner advocacy organization that works on behalf of trying to, maybe help conditions or at least help people communicate about issues.
Well, and there are some programs that allows volunteers, like chaplain services and stuff of that nature. The faith-based program has really been pushed in the last few years. The success rate of faith-based for inmates has been astronomical. The inmates who are completing these courses have a less likely chance of returning to custody once they're released. So yes, but it would normally be through the chaplain type services.
One way that connects this issue to the general public that also came up during the discussion last week was the issue of roadside maintenance, which became, a big thing, kind of a success story that the state had for a while, where inmates would help maintain roads, clean roads. That has largely ended. Ricky Dixon said that agreement with DOT is because they need every staff member in the facilities, and they can't spare anybody to take inmates out on work crews and do that maintenance. And so he was saying, I don't think he brought it up, but a lawmaker did ask about it. And he was saying, that's one of the ways that we're no longer able to kind of turn this system into any use currently because we don't have the staff.
It was a great program. We had work camps at every major institution. I think almost every work camp is currently closed. And it is because we do not have the manpower, like Mr. Dixon said, to supervise these work crews.
Yeah. One thing that comes up a lot in conversations around the conditions in the prison is air conditioning. And that was something that, in fact, lawmakers last year, moved ahead on trying to get some air conditioning in some of the prisons that don't have it, which are many. The governor vetoed that. But interestingly, even the gentleman that spoke at the meeting last week representing employee unions said, that's not what my people are concerned about. He said, sure, AC is nice, but Ricky Dixon said, first of all, it's not feasible in some of these facilities that don't even have windows that close, and so I mean, it's more than cost prohibitive. It's sort of moot. But the union representative said that the two calls that he gets are over the lack of sufficient pay and their safety concerns about not having enough staff working with them. That's what he hears about. He said nobody's talking about AC.
I would venture to say that no correctional staff are complaining about the air conditioning. They need more pay, they need more time off, and they need more boots on the ground. That is the biggest concern for our correctional staff. Now, to address the air conditioning, we have some newer facilities that have been built that have climate control. It's not going to be to the comfort level that everybody would want, but they are better than some of the older facilities that have no air conditioning whatsoever. I would venture to say in coming years that we will be building more and more facilities or housing units that are climate controlled.
Because of the staffing shortage, the governor a couple of years ago sent in the National Guard. It was seen as, kind of an emergency stopgap measure. That was in 2022. They were just pulled out this year. And, that came at no small cost to the taxpayer either. But there's a sense that the staffing situation is at least stable now. What do you think it needs to happen next in order to, I mean, do you think a lot of hiring is still needed given the amount of overtime that's being used?
We're going to have to see more hiring of correctional staff. I do want to address what the governor did with the National Guard. That was the bravest move that he could have made. We had correctional staff that were in diresome need of relief. And he did. He activated the National Guard. He put them in positions that we could actually reduce the amount of overtime our officers were working. But also in that, just like on death row, you know how many National Guardsmen we had assigned to death row during that point in time? 26 National Guardsmen on duty 7 days a week inside of death row. And that was just to operate the row itself.
And what does that indicate to you?
One, death row is way too expensive. Two, our staffing levels at that point in time, I had spoke to a warden, and we were over 160 staff members short at that facility. I think that has been increased or decreased in recent months, but it doesn't matter what it cost to put the National Guardsmen at our correctional facilities. It was well worth the investment.
You know, it seemed to me watching that committee meeting that a lot of Republicans were surprisingly open to the idea, or perhaps not surprisingly, but generally are a little bit more resistant to the idea of large outlays. They seemed to accept the idea that a lot of money was going to be needed. One thing that hasn't really happened is serious conversations about, decarceration, reducing the number of people either in prison by releasing them, whether it's geriatric release for older people, parole, which is sort of a fiction in Florida, or putting fewer people in prison in the first place.
Well, I don't know that I would necessarily agree on not putting people in prison as according to the crime that they've committed. Releasing geriatric inmates, that is something that we can do. We have, and I'll say this, if the legislature is serious about trying to do something positive for the Florida Department of Corrections, bring back the parole. And what we call parole today is basically non-existent. It is a joke. And we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,000 to 4,000 inmates who are currently eligible for parole. Some of these guys have not had a disciplinary report in 40 years.
We should clarify. I mean, Florida got rid of parole in 1983. And so the people that are eligible for parole are these very old cases.
Yes, they are old cases, and some of them are more recent, but it was juvenile offenders who were sentenced to life. Now they're being resentenced, and they're eligible for parole. But to give you an example, I reviewed a parole report. Inmate had not had a disciplinary report in 40 years. 40 years. This guy had helped all kind of other inmates in adult education programs. He has done exceptionally well. They deny him parole because of his institutional conduct. That's a joke. So to say that we have a parole commission that is reviewing cases, reviewing them fairly, that is a joke. If the legislatures want to do their job, make the parole commission do their job. There's many inmates that can be released successfully back as law-abiding citizens. So that would alleviate a lot of our staffing issues. It would also reduce the cost to the taxpayer.
And we should say that this request that came, this $512 million request that came last week, doesn't include salary increases. Ricky Dixon said he's going to be back to talk about that in November before the same committee. So this is very much an ongoing discussion. But But Aubrey Land, it's great to talk to you. Thank you for coming in today and helping us understand some of these issues.
You're more than welcome. It was a pleasure to be here.
All right. Up next, the woman behind both a planned Museum of Black History and a new Black art, culture, and heritage magazine. Welcome back. A new regional magazine highlighting Black art, culture, and heritage focuses on stories overlooked and sometimes forgotten. The publication also comes ahead of the construction of the Florida Black History Museum in St. Johns County. Here to talk about both is Alicia Wilbekin, editor of Estebana and executive director of the Foundation for the Museum of Black History. Alicia, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Anne, for having me today.
So it is a tough time for print media, let's be honest. What made you want to launch a magazine now?
Yeah, so the reason for Estebana, and I just want to take a step back because some folks may not even understand or may not know about the Foundation for the Museum of Black History or for the Black History Museum that's slated to be built in St. John, St. Augustine. And so essentially, in 2023, when the governor put together a task force, a nine-person task force, it became important for him, for this task force to determine the location of a Black History Museum. There were 13 submissions, and out of those 13, it was narrowed down to 3, Opelika, Eatonville, and St. John's, St. Augustine, and then there was one. And so that one was St. Augustine, St. John's. And so what we knew was that when people come to St. John's, St. Augustine, they come for history. History is very important across the state, and this museum will be a statewide museum. And why we decided to do print and digital was because we wanted to make sure that we could get the message out across the state about, as you mentioned, these untold stories. Because there are so many stories throughout the history of Black history, our history, American history, that have not been told, and we want to be able to share those. And also, not only share those, but as we go down this journey to erect a museum, a campus, we want to make sure that everyone understands that we are creating history as we are on this journey.
And so folks who are watching our live stream, they're able to see some images from the magazine's first issue of Estebana. Tell us a little bit about the history of the name.
Sure. Estebana was the first recorded Black child in 1595. And so what's really important about that is that it just shows that Blacks were here in America from the very beginning. But what it also entails is that we wanted to be able to have a name of a magazine that would actually link it to something, because it does, to your point, why Estebana, right? Well, one, the first recorded Black child, but number two, it also shows us that too was an untold story. So as you open the pages of Estebana, then you realize that we are trying to capture those stories, starting with the title of the magazine.
And one of the features is also on Fort Mose, which recently celebrated the replica fort reopening, which is
Yep,
a long
reconstruction.
road. And that for a long time was an untold story.
Absolutely. And we focused on Fort Mose in our first edition of Estebana because of that. Because there's so many people even locally. I can't tell you. I've only been in the area for about 2 years, and I've met so many people that call it Fort Mose. This Fort Mose. They don't know, and they definitely don't know the history. And when they go out to the site, then it all starts to click in terms of that Black history within St. Augustine.
It is a real, renaissance of a lot of elements of Black history in St. Augustine currently. And, it's a place where that was often suppressed actively or overlooked. Um, it includes a really, vibrant civil rights history,
Yes.
a very violent civil rights history that, I think only recently is something that the city started to publicly reckon with. Obviously, Fort Mose is a big part of it. So, between things like Fort Mose, the fort reopening, this new Black History Museum, how is all of that changing the narrative of Black history in St. Augustine?
What I believe, and this is my own personal opinion, what I believe is that it's heightening the awareness as well as preserving the stories that have never been told. So we'll have that opportunity to preserve those stories and create pride amongst our community of all the things, whether they were good or bad during their times. It's our history, so we have to take accountability for that. And so I think that it's important for us to share that information, and that's what Estebana will do.
One of the features is on one of the Florida Highwaymen, which is this group of Black painters, a handful or so, that created this really vibrant artwork. The fellow that you talked to is Curtis Arnett, and if you're watching, you can see some of his incredible images that he painted, and that at the time some of these were created, were sold very cheaply, but now are worth many thousands of dollars.
Yes, absolutely. And kudos for them. I mean, they were using whatever they could, and they were not able to be in galleries and museums and things of that nature back in the 50s. So that's why the name was coined Highwaymen. They were up and down the highway trying to sell their art. Curtis is one of the, I think it's 3 that are left that are alive.
Remaining, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I just can't tell you like the goosebumps that I got talking to him because once again, collectively we've heard of the Highwaymen, right? But never, the told story of Curtis Arnett,
Mhm.
right? And once again, Esteban is able to capture that and to share that with our viewership, whether it's online or whether it's print. And I mean, just amazing guy. I mean, he grew up, he was painting from a very young age, but he never considered himself an artist,
Mhm.
right? It was his aunt that then determined, say, hey, what are you going to be when you grow up? And he's like, I don't know. She said, yes, you do. You're going to be an artist. And that's exactly it. And for me, I'm not an artist. Let me just start there. But what I will say, when I was talking to Curtis, I could just feel the passion from him on, what he does and the joy it brings to him to provide art to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, you're working on telling these stories. The museum is set up to help convey some of those stories, but it's also a tough time in Florida when it comes particularly to things like Black history, where you have, a state that's limiting discussions that related to diversity, equity, inclusion. You're having a state that's limiting access to books. You're having a state that's changing how we're teaching history. How do you see that, those forces working uh, alongside the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I think we just got to keep going. I think that, I understand that, in everything in life, there's going to be challenges, there are going to be complexities. But does that then stop what it is that you're trying to accomplish? And so, from my perspective, we've received a lot of support, whether it's local government and state government. Recently, we just got $1 million appropriation for St. Johns County for the planning, design, and engineering of the museum. So there is a lot of support for this. And so I think that we just have to keep going and not let the noise, as I call it, stop the cause.
And just to be clear, I mean, there's been so much back and forth about where the museum will be in this kind of inter-town battle. Is St. Augustine, is that a done deal?
Pretty much, yeah. We got the $1 million appropriation. So when the governor signed the bill, and not the bill, when the governor signed into uh, oh my goodness, I'm forgetting the word, but the governor signed in July of 2025 the budget. Thank
Oh,
you.
yeah.
Thank you, Alicia. The budget. But when he signed the budget, there were two line items. One was $1 million for the museum in St. John, St. Augustine, and then there was $750,000 for a museum in Opelika. And so he vetoed the line item for Opelika and kept the line item for St. John, St. Augustine.
Gotcha. Well, then it's in the money. Alicia Wilbekin, it's so nice to meet you. Thanks, and thanks for catching us up on your new project.
Thank you so much for having me. Have
All
a
right.
great day.
Up next, a decades-old world-class choir brings its talents to the First Coast. Welcome back. An 80-year-old choir brings its inspirational sound to the First Coast for a performance at Palms Presbyterian Church at the Beaches. Here to talk about the upcoming performances, the church's Director of Music and Fine Arts, Dr. Ron Cummings. Good morning.
Good morning.
Also joining us by video is Jeremy Savoy Jordan. He's the conductor of the Alabama-based Aeolians of Oakwood University. Good morning, Jeremy.
Good morning.
So, Jeremy, the Aeolians have been around since 1946, and you can best tell us, but I mean, you perform a range of musical styles from classical, choral music to gospel to jazz. How do you, first of all, come up with this array of styles, and how do you manage to incorporate those into a cohesive sound?
No, absolutely. We're fortunate at Oakwood University where we get the opportunity to just do many different styles and genres. We have a lot of alumni who have, come through this school that we're influenced by, such as like Whitley Phipps or Take Six, different names that people may have heard. And so that's just a little bit of part of our DNA. And we get the opportunity to work on these different things, to master them. We have wonderful teachers who are in our department who help the students in learning these different styles, as well as just the education that I've received from being an alumnus of Oakwood University as well too. It's things that we practice on and work on, just the different colors, the different timbres, and being able to put everything together and to be authentic when we perform, whether it's classical, whether it's Bach or Mozart, or doing Ralph Carmichael or Derek Johnson, or the many different composers that we have the opportunity to perform and to sing.
And you're a young man, Jeremy, as a conductor for this group. How important is the history of the group to you?
No, it's very important. Like I said before, I had the opportunity to go to Oakwood University. I was there from 2009 to 2013, and I had the wonderful privilege to be a part of the Aeolians. So it's something that's very special to me. It's something that means a lot. I'm the 15th director across our 80-year span. And so I get the opportunity to look at the people who've come before me, to be able to see a lot of the things that they've done, to see the many different students who've come through this group. And it's just important for me to keep that tradition going, to be able to build upon that and to keep that legacy alive.
Ron, the Palms Presbyterian Church, the Fine Arts series is a big part of what it does and its identity. You've featured, the Vienna Boys Choir in the past, Chanticleer. You've had a lot of really powerful and well-known groups come through. Can you explain, how that fits into your mission as a church and a spiritual center?
The whole idea behind the Fine Arts series is to open our doors to welcome the community in and share great music with the Jacksonville community, with the wider community outside of our church walls. And especially important is that all of our concerts are free. So we see it as a hospitality thing, and we see it as a sharing thing and welcoming thing.
And bringing the Aeolians is a big deal. They have not been to the beaches before.
Correct. They have sung in Jacksonville before. It's been a while, but they have never sung at the beaches, and we're very excited. The Aeolians it's our first concert of the season, and it is November 15th. And so we're very excited to have them here for the first time.
What is it? Tell us, what is your pitch on the Aeolians? What will people get out of attending?
Well, the Aeolians, I've had my eye on this group for quite a long time. I wanted to bring them to Jacksonville. In the choral world, the Aeolians are well known. Oakwood University is a respected place. And the Aeolians are well known in the choral community, but they're not well known in the Jacksonville community. And so we wanted to bring this choir to Jacksonville. Our Fine Arts series has featured many of the great college choirs in the United States, the St. Olaf Choir, the Concordia Choir, the Nordic Choir, which is actually coming in February as part of our season. But we have never had the Aeolians, so we were very excited to have them come.
And they're from Huntsville, Alabama. You have not seen them personally before, though. What are you most looking forward to? Or have you?
I have heard the group before, but I have never seen them live.
Okay.
And I've never met Jeremy before. So we've been communicating for quite a while to try to make this concert happen, but I've never actually met him in person.
Yeah. Jeremy, you've also done work with the Miami Union Academy Choral Department, and that is an organization that does this annual social justice concert. Can you talk about how or whether that focus plays into your musical choices with the Aeolians?
No, absolutely. I had the wonderful opportunity to work at Miami Union Academy, which is a historic institution in itself, being created in 1917. And so we're, over 100 years for a predominantly Black academy, and just being able to service people in the area of North Miami right now where it is, and opening up its doors and becoming even more diverse. But one of the things that just was important to me was to provide representation, to do music by composers that look like my students, to talk about things that maybe our students might see in their communities, or things that I've seen in my community as well. So it was important to not only highlight those things, but also to talk about what's going on globally in the world, what's going on in our communities, what's going on in the country, and what's going on globally. And to be able to talk about those things, to highlight things, to see how we can play a role and how we can play a part as individuals in making somebody's life just a little bit better.
Jeremy, we're going to play just a little bit of a performance by the Aeolians, and then we'll just ask you briefly to talk about it.
Absolutely.
Asking God to justify the pain, never knowing He would feel the same. The powerful oppressed of prophecy, but shepherds pressing through have found a King.
So, Jeremy, obviously a kind of a religious number there, but as we said, your range is really broad.
Yes, absolutely. And that piece is Mothers and Shepherds that you all had the opportunity and the chance to see, to hear, arranged by John Stoddard. And we had the opportunity to record that. And it's actually on our Christmas album. We have a Christmas album that came out last year, and that piece is on there. The name of the album is Aeolians and Old Fashioned Christmas. So if you liked what you heard and you want to hear more, you'll be able to check that out on our album, which is on all streaming platforms.
Well, the Aeolians of Oakwood University, they're performing Saturday, November 15th at 7:30 p.m. And they're also participating in the Sunday worship service at 8:30 and 11 a.m. Dr. Ron Cummings, Jeremy Savoy Jordan, thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Up next, a chance to get your hands dirty at a pair of local farm tours.
Folio Weekly Magazine proudly supports WJCT, serving Northeast Florida since 1987. Folio, dedicated to delivering local stories and perspectives. Available at more than 650 locations or visit folioweekly.com. Blue Star Families, supporting military families through connection, community, and local engagement. Constant moves and deployments are part of military life. A little community can go a long way. Learn more at bluestarfam.org/radio.
Vivi Warren is a woman ahead of her time. Her mother, however, is a product of the old order. Exploiting it has earned Mrs. Warren a fortune, but at what cost? Real-life mother duo Imelda Staunton and Bessie Carter star in George Bernard Shaw's classic Mrs. Warren's Profession. Filmed live at the West End, this new production explores the clash between morality and independence, traditions and progress. Wednesday, November 5th. Popcorn and cash bar available. Doors open at 6:30 p.m. Film starts at 7. Go to wjct.org/film for tickets.
In Israel, hostages have been reunited with their families. In Gaza, families are returning to their bombed-out communities. Uncertainty overshadows everyone. The question of Palestinian statehood, Hamas disarming, Israeli occupation of Gaza. The region has been at this point before. Is anything different this time around that could turn the pause into a lasting peace? That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11 on WJCT News 89.9.
Democrats and Republicans in Congress go on debating how to end a government shutdown. Both parties have an eye toward midterm elections a year away. But multiple states go to the polls in 2 weeks. They're some of the first regular elections since the Trump administration came to power this year. We check in on what's driving key races in Virginia, New Jersey, and California. That's next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Well, a chance to explore the farm before the table is in full swing in St. Johns County, where a pair of fall farm tours include pumpkin patches, sunflower farms, and crop mazes. Here to tell us about it is Jenna Dennis, chair of the Hastings Main Street Board. Welcome back, Jenna.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thanks so much.
We're also joined by Andrea Parker, a farmer with Parker Flower Farms and one of the people overseeing the Farm Passport Tours. Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. So tell us, first of all, this harvest trail, this tour was kind of in part your idea to get people out to the farms of southwestern, southern St. Johns County. What's the goal there?
Yeah, so we have so many incredible farms out in St. Johns County, and a lot of people just don't know about them. They think about the beach, they think about downtown St. Augustine, but there's potato farms, there's pumpkin patches, there's sunflower farms, there are crop mazes. And so I wanted to find a way, me and other farmers in the area, wanted to find a way to help cross-promote and collaborate together. And so this summer I was talking to another farmer, Amanda Wells, with Wesley Wells Farms, and we were just thinking through an idea that would help us to cross-promote each other and other farms and get people out to the farms in general.
Yeah.
And decided it would be really cool to do a passport-type tour. So you'd have a brochure that has all the farms listed. We have 18 farms for the first season. But when you visit the farms, you get a stamp for supporting them, and by supporting farms, you work towards prizes. So, T-shirts, swag bags, a potential photo shoot, and a 3-day weekend stay at a beach resort. And so, it's a really good way to get out, see all the different farms in St. Johns County, help support local, and
Yeah.
also win some cool prizes.
Yeah, and so that's this like ongoing farm tour. This goes almost to the end of November. It has already begun, and it is a self-guided tour, as you say, with this passport that can guide you. But Jenna, there's also this other component that's happening in a couple weeks in the 24th and the 25th of October, I guess.
That's correct.
So that is the Hastings Main Street component, and it also involves some of a farm tour. What's going on for that event?
Yeah, so I've known Andrea through Hastings Main Street, and when they mentioned they wanted to do a farm tour, we said, "Oh, we're actually thinking about doing something similar, not of the same scope, but something that would kind of bring people in the community out to the farms, get them immersed, and educate them on all the different types of products that Hastings does produce." So we were excited to partner with them and help support what they were already doing, but collaborate on doing a 1-day farm tour. And that's going to be Friday, the 24th. And that we visit 5 farms, and each farm has a different product, and we get to kind of visit them and see their setup. And it ends at Aubrey Land Farms, which we will be doing a paella dinner as a fundraiser. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And then it launches our Fall Festival of Art this year. It's going to be Saturday. We close down all of Main Street, and it's a huge party. There's live music, vendors, food trucks. We also have a vintage tractor display that's going to be a lot of fun. And we've invited plein air artists to come out and paint all of the community, including the tractors. But one of our exciting things too is we have a lot of live artists that are going to be doing demonstrations, including R.L. Lewis, one of the original Highwaymen. We have Claire Kendrick, who is an amazing local watercolorist. And then we have Courtney Stanek, who is a muralist, and she's going to be doing a live art display on some of the buildings in town.
A really special opportunity to see one of the original Highwaymen and to watch him do his work. So that's a great opportunity. Overall, what is the value of getting people familiar with the farms of southern Southwest St. Johns County?
So I think there's a lot of value. I think educating people on, obviously where their food comes from, where a lot of the industry is in St. Johns County, but also really helping support our farmers through agritourism. That's a really important component for us.
Yeah, and I mean, there's some things that I think are a natural draw, especially in the days of Instagram, like the sunflower farm. So that's something people can buy flowers, but they can also take pictures and tour and just learn a little bit more about the life cycle of those plants.
Exactly. There's quite a few farms that have flowers right now. Our farm is one of them. We have 5 acres of sunflowers, and it really is just an incredible thing to walk down, having sunflowers surrounding you on all sides, and really get to enjoy the beauty of the farms in St. Johns County.
And so, other than that, though, there are, as you said, there's pumpkin patches. There is a crop maze that's been going there, I think, at the Sykes Farm for a few years now. And
15 years, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
More than I thought. And so there really is a lot more attention on kind of this season and getting people to explore the agricultural side of the county during the fall.
Absolutely. So you have, like you said, the crop mazes, pumpkin patches. We even have a new young farmer who has a farm stand doing eggs and homemade bread and things like that. That's Pastures of Piccolata. There's so many wonderful farms on the farm tour, and they're all listed on there, going from, like I said, pumpkin patches down to meat and eggs and sunflowers, and it's a really cool experience.
All right. Well, we've got a link to the events on our website, but you can also find them at the Hastings Main Street event site and the farm tour website. Right?
Yes, most of it's, I think, through hastingsfl.org.
All right.
So there's links to all the different pages.
Excellent. Well, Jenna Davis, Andrea Parker, thank you so much for being here. Have a great festival.
Great.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much.
And that's our program. Thank you for listening. If you have comments or questions, you can send either to First Coast Connect at WJCT.org. And if you missed anything, catch our rebroadcast tonight at 8 o'clock or find our entire archive on your favorite podcast platform. Join us tomorrow when we talk to acclaimed writer and environmental reporter Craig Pittman about his reading in Jacksonville this Friday. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
The North Florida TPO is committed to shaping our transportation future. We're focused on planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, connected community. Learn more at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. 10 Across presents Convergence, October 22nd and 23rd at the Hyatt Riverfront in Jacksonville. Leaders will discuss infrastructure, climate, and insurability. Features a conversation with Mayor Deegan. Registration at 10across.org/events. That's 10across.org/events.
This is WJCT News